Thank you very much, Audrey, and thank you to the Positive Economy Forum for having me here today. And as I think so many of the speakers before me articulated, we are in a world right now that is facing so many issues. And I think, as Letizia very movingly showed, businesses have played a role in creating many of those problems. And businesses now have to play a role in helping solve those problems. But I also fully agree with Pierre that we are probably at one of the most exciting points in time in human history for us to come together and make those changes happen. And I had an incredibly disruptive moment some 2 decades ago when I had moved to South Africa and we were starting a mobile phone company called MTN. And we were about to launch prepaid services, and we were one of the first operators launching prepaid services, so we went to many different research houses asking them how we should price, etc. And all of them said, you shouldn't launch it. It'll never be a successful business. And we launched anyway. And literally within 1 month, we reached our annual sales target. And so we went into the townships to find out why, what was happening. And it was the most unbelievable display of entrepreneurship I think I've ever seen in my life, where people had taken briefcases and put phones in briefcases. They'd set up trailers and put phones in trailers. They were selling phone calls on the street. And for me, it was that huge shift in my lens 20 years ago on the power of business to make a difference in the world. And it showed me the power, if businesses just listen and learn from the right people and put the right tools into their hands, people can lift themselves out of poverty. So since that moment 20 years ago, I've been reflecting on how do we scale business as a force for good in the world. And we were listening recently to the wonderful speaker and author Brené Brown. I'm sure many of you have heard her TED Talk. And she was talking about how human beings, how we have to get out of the cheap stands in the arena and step into the arena and step into our courage and higher purpose. And I couldn't help but think, as business leaders, that we're still sitting as a collective in the cheap stands. And how can we step into that arena to truly scale business as a force for good in the world? So in looking at that, I think all of us, and many of you, have already done this. I think that first step into the arena for any business leader has to be, how can we look at ourselves and how can we look at our own businesses to make sure each of our businesses is truly driving change in the world? And so at Virgin, we've been on that journey. And we are still going to be on that journey. We still have a lot to learn. We have a long way to go. But what we're trying to do is look at how do we embed purpose at the very center of every single one of our businesses. And how do we make sure that we use our voice and our brand to shout about issues that are unacceptable and get people to act? And how do we look at the industries we're in and make sure that we work together with our competitors to change those industries? And how do we make sure that we also look beyond that and make sure that all of our investments are going into investments that are going to make a difference in the world? And I'm sure you're going to talk a lot about impact investing over the next few days. But doing it in our businesses isn't enough. And again, we heard the issues that the world is facing. We all know them. We all see the news every single night. We need to figure out how we come together to really scale business for good in the world. And for those of you in the room that have tried to transform a business, you know it's hard. And we've worked with hundreds of businesses around the world to look at that transformation process. And it's almost like, as businesses, there's millions of businesses around the world, and we're almost like this gigantic fleet, and our compass has been set on short-term profitability. And I always get frustrated when people talk about capitalism being broken. Because it's not the platform of capitalism that's broken, it's we as the architects and the system that we've created that's broken. And the warped incentive structures that we've put in place to drive that focus on short-term accountability. And I always think of the wonderful quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he talked about doing well is all about doing good. That's what capitalism's all about. And I think as business leaders, we have a moment in time right now to turn that fleet around and look at how we set our compass truly on a way of doing business that's going to be better for the well-being of people and planet all over the world. and how we set that compass on truly making sure that every single one of our businesses is driven by doing no harm to the planet, looking at how we're 100% human in everything we do, and having 0% tolerance for corruption. And over the years, the foundation that I work with, Virgin Unite, we've been looking at how we can help scale business as a force for good and how we can shift that compass and work with business leaders all over the world. And there's 4 things that continuously come up. The first one is really all about how do we start making sure we paint the right vision so that all the ships in the fleet of this new way of doing business know where to head. And there's no way we can paint that vision until we ask ourselves some really hard questions. And we have to ask those questions, for example, how can we move and shift that $5 trillion that currently goes into fossil fuel subsidies into clean energy? How can we make sure that the $33 trillion in natural resource services that Mother Nature gives us every single year is valued and protected, and for the services that we use as individual businesses, we're accounting for those on the balance sheet? How can we make sure we start closing this inequality gap? And asking ourselves those hard root cause questions to make sure that we're solving for the right things and painting that clear vision of where we all want to head. So that's number 1, is that vision and those questions. And number 2 must be about collaboration. In this incredibly interconnected world that we live in today, which is being played out in front of us on the news every single day, we have to break down the silos between business, government, not-for-profit, between each other as competitors, between each other as individuals, and look at how we collaborate on a much larger scale. And that's one thing as an organization we have been very focused on, is working with some fantastic partners to look at how we truly set up these disruptive collaborations in the world and how we become brave to really get in the room, unlikely marriages of groups that would never come together before. And some of those groups that we've helped to incubate are organizations like the Elders, that is working behind the scenes on conflict resolution, or the Carbon War Room. It's an entity that we set up to look at how do we make sure that we're breaking down market barriers so that capital can flow to the right solutions that are going to have a positive impact on the world. Or something called the B Team, which is a group of business leaders who have come together to look at how they can use their collective voice and their collective action and their humility in saying that they are learning every day and they're making mistakes every day to make sure that we work towards, all together, a better way of doing business. So collaboration has to be number 2. Number 3, it has to be leadership. And we know we're all in a crisis of leadership. And Jacques talked this morning a lot about trust. And Endelman just did an incredible study where they looked at over 27 countries around the world, and they interviewed close to 30,000 people. And it came out that 50% of those respondents do not trust businesses and business leaders. So can you imagine if we were in a relationship with another person and we didn't trust them 50% of the time, what the world would look like? And that's what people feel about business right now. So trust is critical. And I think with leadership, we're starting to see great leaders emerge and that have been doing this work for decades as well. If people like Mohammed Yunus, people like Paul Polman, Mo Ibrahim, Gilliam Liao from Natura. So they're out there. We just need to celebrate them, and we need millions more of these great leaders that are having the courage, the business leaders, to stand up and do the right thing. And we also need to look at this next generation. And I get very excited every time I get asked to speak at an MBA program because I think it's going to be a wonderful session about purpose. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been disappointed when I walked in the room. And I'll give you one example of a story where we were talking about leadership and the future of leadership. And a wonderful young woman raised her hand and she asked me the question, can a leader really be successful and be empathetic? And I paused a moment, surprised by the question, and asked her why she asked the question. And she talked about how in the finance company that she had just been working for, all of them did a test on their attributes and their skills, and empathy came out at the bottom of the list for her boss, and he was celebrating that. And it brought me back to when I first started in business many, many years ago. I remember my very first mentor. He gave me 2 books. The first book was The Art of War, so that I had, I guess, to prepare for battle in the boardroom. And then just in case I didn't make it in that battle, the second book he gave me was The Joy of Cooking. And I still today have flashbacks thinking I'm going to be running into the boardroom with a spatula and a spoon in my hand, ready for war. But how do we turn that upside down so that we're not looking at work like, or we're not using the terms in work about war? And how do we make it something that young people are going to aspire to want to be business leaders because they can make a difference in the world? And one of the things we're trying to do through the B team is get companies all over the world to take on an initiative called 100% Human at Work so that they can put treating their employees and the people they interact with at the very core of everything they do. So leadership has to be there. So collaboration, leadership, painting the right vision. And then the other thing that absolutely has to be in this new world of business that we're painting is also the celebration of these emerging leaders that are coming up in the world right now. Because they naturally, by the businesses they're creating, are turning business upside down through the sharing economy, through the revolution of technology right now, whether that be organizations like Solar City, Airbnb, or the wonderful Matt Mulegi from WordPress, who talks a lot about how open source will change every single industry as we know it in the coming decade. So I think as business leaders, we have probably a point in time that is a significant opportunity for business right now. But the urgency cannot be underestimated. And I think you'll hear from some wonderful speakers like Johan Rockstrom in the coming days, also Nigel from the We Mean Business Council. And the urgency of the issues demands that we as business leaders right now put down our spoons, our spatulas, whatever weapons we have walking into that boardroom, and look at how we put in place the right vision, ask the right questions, collaborate on a much larger scale than we ever have before, celebrate the right leadership, and make sure that we're all working together for this amazing world that we could live in if business changed the way we did it and put people and planet at the very core of what we do. Thank you.
Jean, vous nous avez dit, you told us, que we can sit if you want. Vous nous avez dit qu'il nous fallait effectivement, we have to break down the silence et changer les règles. Mais you can hear the sensation. On a quand même l'impression que c'est le fait d'individus, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut un leader fort dans une entreprise, dans une multinationale, quelqu'un qui ait une personnalité très charismatique pour faire descendre la décision et la motivation et changer les choses. Pourquoi dans les grandes entreprises, les multinationales, à part des cas très précis, comme évidemment par exemple le cas de Virgin, il n'y a pas cette préoccupation de la part des leaders d'avoir un charisme au moins aussi grand que leur multinationale, c'est-à-dire qu'ils puissent être perçus dans le monde entier?
Yeah, I think and I should apologize that I can't speak French. I'm sorry you're having to translate. But I think that business leaders, just like any human being, in their heart, wants to drive that change. I think what the way we have structured capitalism, the way we've architectured the system of capitalism has focused on short-term profitability. Mm-hmm. So any business leader that you talk to who wants to drive change is often then pushed by the quarterly profits that they need to report on. And then you have brave leaders like Paul Polman from Unilever who stepped out and decided he wasn't going to do quarterly reporting anymore. So I think it's important right now that we make sure those brave leaders that stand up, we're supporting and making sure that we celebrate them. And that will hopefully inspire lots more business leaders around the world to take that path. And that's one of the things we're hoping to do with the B team. There's these 15 leaders who believe in this and believe in a better way of doing business and want to use their collective voice to look at how they can help transform the model. But I think it's also interesting, too, where leadership is radically changing right now. We've been working with a number of companies who are looking at more distributed leadership models. And that's one of the reasons why we feel it's so important to embed this kind of philosophy about being 100% human at work throughout the whole organization, because we think leadership will come at all points through the organization. So I think that's a very exciting development as well.
Mais justement, par rapport à ce que vous dites à l'instant, on parle beaucoup en France ces temps-ci du fait que les jeunes générations ont un rapport complètement différent à l'autorité, à la hiérarchie dans les entreprises. Alors, c'était déjà le cas dans les entreprises anglo-saxonnes depuis une quinzaine d'années. Ça le devient également dans ce qu'on appelle souvent la vieille Europe. Est-ce que ça change là aussi pour vous la façon d'appréhender la marche d'une société, d'une entreprise multinationale, cette dilution du leadership, du pouvoir et de la décision?
I think absolutely it's changing the way the world does business, and these wonderful young people that are coming into companies and demanding that work is meaningful and it's purposeful and it's not about being competitive, it's not about war. And I think that will certainly shift the way the world does business. But I think you need, because of the time frame we're in right now, we need both. We need leaders at the top who are transforming their businesses, as well as young people coming into the companies that are transforming the business. And I think one of the most exciting things is the types of businesses these young people are starting. Like Matt Mullengi, who started WordPress. You know, his vision was to make sure that that was open source, so as many people could get access to it as possible. And he's doing things like making sure that everyone around the world, no matter where they sit in his organization, are paid a fair living wage compared to all their counterparts, no matter where they sit in the world. So I think these young people that are coming in have a radically different philosophy that will start to transform the way we do business. I think you have to do both, transform existing leadership as well as make sure we celebrate and support these young people coming into work.
Et quand en aura-t-on fini avec cette image, qui n'est pas qu'une image, qui est parfois une réalité, du comité directeur, et pas seulement du patron, mais du comité directeur d'une grande entreprise, d'une multinationale, qui peut apparaître comme, voilà, vous parliez tout à l'heure de court terme, comme des gens qui sont là pour un temps très court, pour faire un maximum de profit pour eux, et qui partent en laissant l'entreprise pas forcément en meilleure santé que quand ils l'ont trouvée. Quand en aura-t-on fini avec cette méthode de management, cette façon de penser l'entreprise?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still, sadly, lots of that type of management in many of the larger companies and many companies around the world. I think probably, sadly, it's still more business as usual and business as norm rather than the other way. But just as an example, I mean, when we started this network of the 100, how do you be 100% human at work, we got hundreds of companies that wanted to be part of it. And each of them, you can see, like Zappos, for example, following the holacracy model, where it's completely distributed leadership, or others that have gotten rid of their middle management. So there's many different new leadership models emerging right now, I think, in early stage. And I think what we'll see over the next decade is those models start to take more and more precedent, and the old models will die. Because we just recently did a study in London with about, I think it was 4,000 young people, and asked them what they wanted to see of business in the future. And again, they came back with, we want to see work and business be meaningful. We want to have a purpose. We want it to be something that's joyful. We want to ultimately something that's going to make a better difference in the world.
Est-ce que vous pensez que cette génération peut compter sur la politique? Do you need politic people, ou vous comptez beaucoup plus sur les citoyens, sur chacun d'entre nous ici?
Yeah, I think that, you know, we are in such an exciting moment in time right now, that the world is so incredibly interconnected, and that citizens and people have the power in their hands now. And so I think we'll see the shift of these new young leaders coming in, citizens having power, that will both put pressure on the way we've structured organizations traditionally. And I think the more and more of those young people that rise into starting companies that are going to make a significant difference and be very successful, because many of the companies they're starting right now have been hugely successful, whether that be like Airbnb or what Elon Musk is doing with Solar City, or Method. There's so many of them now that are starting starting to emerge. So I think they will more and more become a shining light and start to change, working in conjunction with citizens, because the citizens have the power, the purchasing power. And you can see now too, we just recently did a study in the US too, where people's buying decisions are starting to really be shifting right now based on companies that have purpose. And that wasn't true 10 years ago. So I think we're at an exciting moment.
Et alors, quels sont les pays, les zones du monde les plus dynamiques aujourd'hui, selon vous, dans cette optique-là?
I think it's emerging in all parts of the world. I think that one of the really exciting things is the energy revolution. And I think what we're seeing in Africa right now is energy is going to, the new clean renewable energy is going to leapfrog the old world of energy. And we're starting to see that with solar in particular right now. So I think we're seeing it emerging, and for example, M-Pesa in Kenya, in terms of using a mobile phone as a bank, they were the first ones that really brought that forward. So I think what we're seeing now is this ingenuity and this entrepreneurship in many markets that we would have called developing markets that are leapfrogging far ahead current markets right now. So I think we're seeing lots of exciting stuff coming out around the world from emerging markets, as well as, for example, Silicon Valley right now is shifting a lot of what they're thinking about to how can they use those tools that they've created, those online tools, to make a better difference in the world.
Alors sur l'Afrique, on va en terminer par ça justement, qui est souvent perçu en France comme finalement une menace. Alors quand on parle en France de l'Afrique, c'est essentiellement pour parler des migrants ou des personnes qui voudraient venir en Europe chercher du travail et non développer leur propre pays. Or, on constate qu'évidemment ce continent se développe à très grande vitesse. Et par exemple, hier encore, un chiffre sortait sur le fait que la compagnie de téléphone, enfin de communication Orange, que vous connaissez sans doute, Orange, a la moitié de ses clients du monde entier est sur le continent africain. Alors pour l'instant, ce ne sont pas les clients qui, par client, rapportent le plus de revenus, mais il y a ils sont très prometteurs. Et c'est quand même assez, en tout cas symbolique, qu'une multinationale comme Orange ait la moitié de sa clientèle réunie dans un seul continent, et que ce continent soit le continent africain.
And I think what we're seeing globally right now is people starting to. There was this lovely Egyptian man who stood up in a gathering we were doing in Cairo, and he said, "When will politicians realize that the only borders left are on maps?" And I think what we're starting to see now around the world is that diversity brings great strength and brings great innovation. And we're learning every day from the people that we're working with across the African continent. So I think it's shifting our lens and our mindset to not look at this as an issue, but look at it as an opportunity. And again, I think that's true with every country around the world, not just France, but it's America. It's how do we change the mindset to think about how we all collectively work together towards this better world.
Merci beaucoup. Many thanks.
Thank you
very much, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you.